How's it going, everyone? The One MFP here. I hope you're all well. I hope you're healthy. I hope you're staying safe. Today I come to you with a new Pluralone reaction. Pluralone AKA Josh Klinghoffer recently dropped a new single that will be off of his upcoming album entitled I Don't Feel Well. The song is called The Night Won't Scare Me. So I'm really hyped up about this song and the album altogether. If you watched my past Pluralone reaction, which was to Obscene, I kind of discussed how much I really enjoyed To Be One With You. And, with that, of course, comes the excitement of seeing what happens with a second album from Pluralone. And I mean, there's a lot of intrigue as well. And I guess the best way I could really explain that is, there's two major components to it. First being the sound, how will the sound differ from To Be One With You to here with I Don't Feel Well? What will differ? What will stay the same? We're kind of going to get a better idea of what Josh wants to do under the Pluralone name. Another thing that sparks intrigue within me is the subject matter, which is something I also referred to in my Obscene reaction. With To Be One With You, the album itself has this overarching theme of interconnectedness. We hear a lot about, or at least I interpreted a lot about this interconnectedness where there's this plurality of thoughts and opinions and values, behaviors, and whatnot, and how those things, as much as they may be competing and as much as they may be opposites, they kind of come together and they form one entity, one act, one image, one overall big picture. And that idea, it applies to individuals, whether we're talking about more of an internal conflict of desires and values and thoughts, or we could also be talking about this on a multi-person scale. And that's kind of the idea behind To Be One With You. That's kind of the main overall theme that I hear when I listen to the album. As much as we may have similarities or differences within us, outside of us, with other people, everything all comes together to form one reality, one entity. Now, given that this second album is written in a time of isolation, I'm personally interested to see how that theme plays into this album here. It may be a bit more difficult under the current circumstances to really grasp that interconnectedness, in a time of such confusion and worry. I think we all would like to move on to a reality with more of a semblance to normality. But in order to get to that reality, we really need to function together, act as a unit, really act as one to get through a difficult situation. Now, I think one of the main issues here is, as much as we may have tried to get to that reality, it's been a while since we felt that normality. And, especially with all the differences in beliefs and behaviors, I think it becomes really easy to point fingers at, the differing behaviors and opinions. And therefore, it really amplifies the sense of division amongst us. So I guess the main thing I want to say here is, how does that affect the message? What is the message going into this second album? What is the overarching theme? I'm very interested to see what that is. So yeah, I think that really summarizes my intrigue of this second album. And from the excitement standpoint, like I said, I just really enjoyed To Be One With You. So I'm really excited to hear what comes next for Pluralone. So this track here, I think, is going to be a bit of an indicator of what's to come. A bit of a teaser, if you will. So it's called The Night Won't Scare Me. Let's get right into it.
Must be hard to see what's staring back in the mirror.
loving the guitar on this one. Vocals are on point too.
Like the grass upon the crash side. Sunlight off in the bedroom, last I can
It's a beautiful transition.
Being here, not here, here and far off, same time. I never wanna hurt you, but I'm gonna make you cry.
And I absolutely love the vocal delivery on this one. It's a gorgeous outro. Oh man, I love that. I like that one a lot. Right off the bat, I was speaking about before, even reacting to this song, I was talking about being intrigued about the differences in sound that we might see going into this second album, just because it's coming from a different place, right? At the end of the day, Plural One was a different thing back when To Be One With You came out versus where it's at now with I Don't Feel Well. As far as To Be One With You goes, that album was written, recorded, and released while Josh was still a part of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. The album kind of got a little bit more life after he left the Chili Peppers, and I'm guessing that's mostly because that kind of became his main project once he was no longer a Chili Pepper. So, you take that into account and you go into this next album. I feel like the mindset as far as this Plural One project goes is different for Josh, I feel like perhaps back then he had these ideas that he wanted to put out, but at the end of the day, I don't know that Plural One was really a main priority. And if I compare this track here, The Night Won't Scare Me, to things we've heard on To Be One With You, it feels like this track is a little bit more fleshed out. It feels a little bigger. Just looking at length in of itself, I feel like this track here would be the second longest track on To Be One With You if it were on To Be One With You. I feel like the only track that's longer on that album is Segway, which, I think it serves a major purpose in that album. It feels like it really concludes something big. It feels like it's connecting a lot of ideas. So there's really a point for that song to be bigger, longer. Whereas this track here, I don't know exactly where it's going to fit within the body of work that the second album will be. But, at the end of the day, it is a longer track than what we're accustomed to from Plural One as far as To Be One With You goes. So I'm really interested to see, will the other tracks on the second album be longer than what we've seen on To Be One With You as well? That remains to be seen, but this track right here, it gives me that sense. It gives me that sense that Josh was really going into the second album with the intention of Plural One being his main priority. And that really shines through in this track for me. With To Be One With You, it felt like everything was kind of written on the piano, and Josh, being the talented multi-instrumentalist that he is, he was able to really flesh those tracks out around those ideas. But at the end of the day, it really did feel like a lot of the album was revolving around the piano, and it made for a beautiful album. I really loved the sound of that album. But like I said, it was going to be interesting to see how that would differ here going into the second album. And I do believe we are getting a different sound out of Josh here. And I'm really digging it. As much as I dig To Be One With You, as much as I still listen to that album a lot to this day, I'm really digging this sound for Josh. And I'm really excited to see where he goes with this on the second album. And just to speak briefly on that sound, I mentioned briefly how it really felt like To Be One With You was written on the piano, and Josh kind of, built around that. Here, it feels like, how could I say this? I don't know. Like with Obscene, you got the sense that it wasn't so much the case, right? You had this B-side where I guess it didn't really fit into the overall track list of, the overall final track list of To Be One With You, and you kind of felt that. It felt like it was written in a different manner. And I think, if I'm not wrong, Obscene was written for the Chili Peppers, and with that in mind, Josh was writing it on the guitar, I suppose. So you really got that sense of like a different feel to the track, and I got that different feel out of this too. It really did feel like, as much as this may have been written in some way on one instrument, it really did feel like Josh was thinking even more so about instrumentation, about bringing in a lot of different elements into these tracks, or at least into this track. So with this respective track, I really enjoyed the guitar, I really enjoyed the synthesizers that were going, I really enjoyed the drum work, and if I'm not wrong, I think I saw a tweet earlier today from Jack Irons. He mentioned that he was very happy to have provided the drums for this track. He also did some drums on To Be One With You, so that's pretty interesting. It's pretty cool that Josh and Jack collaborate in that manner. It really shines here in this track. You have some beautiful rhythm going, and the synthesizers come together with that really nicely. The guitar work come in really nicely with that. The piano comes in really nicely, and much like we've seen already from Josh, he's really good at using his voice in such a way that feels like it's part of the instrumental. He really harmonizes it well with the instrumentation, and I think it really stands out and makes for a positive listening experience. Now, one more quick thing I want to touch on before jumping into the lyrics and discussing them and giving my interpretation of them is the artwork for this track right here. We have it's pretty different from what we saw with To Be One With You. With To Be One With You, we had abstract art for the album and for the B-sides as well. Whereas here we have an actual person, and what's really interesting about it to me is the person is holding up something that, in my opinion, is abstract art, and they have this background that's completely blurred out. So the only things that are really in focus is the abstract art and the person is kind of, as much as they're part of the picture, the abstract art is really what stands out, and the person is kind of secondary, because at the end of the day, they're hiding behind it. You see their hand, and that's like the first time, at least for me, that's the first time I noticed there was a person in the picture. So, I think that speaks a lot to the overall message here. If I'm thinking of the abstract art as a representation of the music, because I do think To Be One With You was a bit more abstract in terms of messages and whatnot. As much as the message may be clear if you really pay attention, I feel like Josh really focuses on the sound of the music, and the lyrics, they're very well thought out. I wouldn't call them secondary at all, but I feel like if you're listening to a Plural One track, the lyrics may not be the first thing you really hone in on. I feel like the sound is really going to carry you away. And then once you start really putting together the lyrics, once the words really start jumping out at you, that's when, that also becomes a major component of the music. And in terms of lyrics, you kind of have a lot of things coming together to form one message. And, it can be a little bit ambiguous, a little bit obscure, but as you think about it, as you put thought behind it, the message starts becoming more clear. At least that's the way I feel. So when I think of those tracks, I do think of abstract art in a way. So I do think that artwork, that cover art, was very fitting for the types of tracks we got. So with that in mind, it does feel like what this individual is holding up is kind of like a representation of the music. It's the art. And this cover art tells me that this is what this individual is holding on to, the music, the art, in a time of such confusion and blurriness. So I'm giving 2 thumbs up for the creativity behind that cover art. I really dig that. Now with that said, let's jump into the lyrics and I'll discuss a bit about what they mean to me, what I heard in them, how I interpret them overall. Tricky calling shots with a myopic vision. Must be hard to see what's staring back in the mirror every night. It'll all be different from this moment forward. Let your guard down, turn around, jump shot. What's right just might not matter. So I feel like these lines right here are a good example of what I was just talking about in terms of abstract art. This feels like what I was just talking about. You have these lines that hit you in a certain way, like they make you feel something, but you can't quite put a finger on what the message specifically is. And I feel like the more you listen to what Josh is saying in these tracks, the more the message kind of evolves, the more you hear it in these lyrics. And I really appreciated that about To Be One With You. And it looks like we're gonna get something similar here with I Don't Feel Well, so I'm really hyped about that. But just to discuss these lines here, tricky calling shots with myopic vision. With myopic vision, we're talking about nearsightedness. So, I think he may be speaking to kind of being too stuck in your own perspective, having a difficulty to really connect with external beliefs, beliefs that you don't necessarily hold. You're having difficulties getting outside of yourself. And it's interesting because it must be hard to see what's staring back in the mirror. That kind of contrasts that in the sense that if you are in that state of mind, you may not be questioning yourself so much. But at the same time, on that same token, if you are looking in the mirror and aren't satisfied with what you see staring back, and you aren't really questioning yourself so much and are just like satisfied with your own beliefs and your own way of thinking, you kind of run into a wall, right? Because you're thinking to yourself, why am I not satisfied? But you're also thinking to yourself that you're doing everything right. But I'm also hearing this in the sense that you're having difficulty seeing what's actually staring you back in the mirror, like in the sense that the nearsightedness is affecting your vision in that manner, like you can't actually see properly. So there may be something interesting going on in terms of double meaning or multiple meanings there. So it's going to be interesting to take that into account moving forward. Then we have that followed up with, it'll all be different from this moment forward. I personally heard that as, with everything going on, everything that's happened, things will never quite be the same. Everything has to be different because, you can't undo what's currently happening. So when he says, let your guard down, turn around, jump shot, what's right just might not matter. To me, that means like, as an individual, it's going to be very hard to really understand what's right and wrong. So when he says what's right just might not matter, I feel like he's saying what you judge to be right may not necessarily be right. There's just a lot of turmoil, there's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of uncertainty. So to try and figure out what's right could kind of be a dead end because we don't know exactly what's right. Turnaround jump shot, I'm guessing that's a reference to basketball where you're kind of going with instinct a little bit, I'd imagine. I'm not a basketball player, but I'm pretty sure when you're going for a turnaround jump shot, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're going with instinct, right? You don't know exactly where the basket is going to be. You're kind of just going with intuition. You're going with feeling, and you're hoping you score with that jump shot, that turnaround jump shot. So ultimately, what that boils down to for me with respect to this track is, you don't know if what you're going to do is right. You don't know if you're going to make a mistake, but ultimately you have to act. And the stress of trying to make things right all the time will probably lead to inaction, and that's just not good right now. You kind of need to put one foot in front of the other. You need to take steps. You need to move forward, or else you'll just be stuck. Now, on to the next lines. The grass is green everywhere you're not, and the dark shows how to light. It's all in the breeze, said the tornado. Then it winked at me, loss of life. This to me kind of speaks to that sense of isolation where it feels like everything around you is just taunting you. You feel like alone on your little island. And to say the grass is green everywhere you're not, it really speaks to feeling like you're in a bad place, and it's hard to get out of that. Then following that, we have tricky pulling words just like that out of the sky. How is this ever going to make sense to both you and I all the time, you and I? So here we have that concept of a difference in perspectives, a difference in opinions, a difference in beliefs coming into play in this track. And to me, it's part of this chaotic feeling. It's part of feeling like the world is taunting you. It's part of feeling like you're in this bad place that's hard to get out of. It's much like I said earlier about how to be one with you is about this interconnectedness, and how as much as we may be different, we come together to form one entity. And it's important to take that into account because it's a big part of society, and, feeling fulfilled as being part of that society. But at a time like this where, our actions feel so crucial, in order to really move forward, for us to have beliefs that really puts us at odds, it's kind of difficult to find that common ground in order to begin the conversations we need to have in order to move forward. How is this ever going to make sense to both you and I all the time? That's kind of what I'm making of this specific line. It's, how do we find this common ground to have the discussions we need to have, to come to the understandings we need to come to in order to move forward? The grass is green wherever you go. The next excuse, colorblind, and mistakes are made. And from that we grow like the grass upon the crash site. This section to me relates heavily to the earlier section about what's right just might not matter. As much as we may try to do what's right all the time, and as much as I think it's important to try to do what's right, I think it's also important not to be too hard on yourself when things go wrong, because things going wrong is an opportunity for you to assess things, to understand what went wrong, why things went wrong, why they're wrong altogether. And it's a learning opportunity. It's a time for you to figure out what you could do better and how you can be better. So wherever you may crash and burn, the grass will grow nonetheless. So you have the opportunity to make a good environment from an environment that may not be so good, where things went wrong. Now the next lines are, turn the light off in the bedroom, unless I can run and hide, being here and not here, here and far off, same time. I never want to hurt you, but I'm going to make you cry, being here and not there, too much one life. Now what really stands out to me about this section right here is, I never want to hurt you, but I'm going to make you cry. That to me just speaks to being willing to make mistakes, not trying to necessarily be perfect, being open to being you, and making mistakes that you can grow from. But this whole repetition of being here and not here, which we see at 2 points in this section, and then that followed by too much one life, to me that just speaks to having this struggle internally of figuring out whether or not you should put in the effort, because you don't necessarily want to make a mistake. As much as you want to do right, you're kind of stuck trying to figure out what's right to you. And that really speaks to what I was talking about earlier, of being stuck in a state of paralysis where you're just trying so hard to figure out what's right that you end up doing nothing. That's followed by, a new day is fast approaching. Along the way, I heard we all tell ourselves stories to live and survive. Scrape your conscience clear so there's no trace of, and we never learn. Time and time, and that's not it, said the outcome. You know in your heart what is right, who warms, who shades, and who just never learns. Black and white make gray, act surprised. Decisions made, or are they prescribed? Who presides, resides, turns on the lights, the night won't scare me away. So here what we have to me is a bit of a transition, And I think Josh does it really effectively lyrically with the whole turn off the lights in the bedroom. And then he starts off this new section with a new day is fast approaching. You know, if you're trying to make a mental image of this, it just feels like, you know, you're going to sleep, you're turning off the lights and you're waiting for the new day to come. As this new day is approaching, which could symbolize, you know, getting through a certain situation, such as any of the difficult situations you could think of, really. Along the way, I heard we all tell ourselves stories to live and survive. So what I really like about this is it really goes back to the beginning of the song where we kind of spoke to this concept of nearsightedness and kind of maybe struggling to see outside of yourself and you know, see things from a different perspective. We've been so worried to do something wrong that maybe we don't do anything at all. Here to say along the way, we all tell ourselves stories to live and survive. It's like we tell ourselves what we need to hear in order to feel like we did right, you know, in order to feel like we've done enough, in order to feel like we made the right decisions. And that could kind of lead us to that corner that we find ourselves in at the beginning of the song, where, you know, we look in the mirror and we struggle to see what's looking back, whether that is because we're not satisfied with who we are and we're not necessarily certain why, or because we just struggle to identify ourselves altogether. It's just these subtle things that are difficult to be honest about, either because you know, we have to lie to ourselves sometimes to make ourselves feel good about what we did, you know, or what we didn't do, about what we struggled to really figure out, or simply we just didn't understand how to assess things. So we tried to make a narrative when things didn't make sense. You know, we didn't just allow it to not make sense. We had to make a narrative to conceptualize things, to understand things. I think that's just a big part of understanding how to move forward. And here we're speaking to the difficulties we may face because of that phenomenon. You know, you tell yourselves these stories and you believe them. And if they end up being untrue and you continue believing them, you're kind of stuck in a corner, because it's hard to decipher what's real and what's not, what's opinion and what's, you know, a little bit more unbiased. It's hard to say what's truth, because at the end of the day, what is truth? It's hard to figure out what that overall reality is. So to say we never learn time and time, you know, in your heart, what is right, who warms, who shades. To me, this is all about going with feeling. You know, we've already discussed trying to figure out what's right and wrong may kind of lead you into a state of paralysis, because it's really hard to figure that out without the proper information. Ultimately, going with feeling is also fallible. You're not necessarily going to make the right decisions and the right assessments in going with feeling. But at the end of the day, it's what's going to feel right to you. And then it's going to allow for mistakes to be made, mistakes that you could learn from. And then this line about black and white make gray, act surprised. You know, to me, this black and white contrast is similar to this contrast of what's right and wrong. You know, we try to think in that manner of black and white, right and wrong. But ultimately, there's just this huge gray area. And that's kind of where we live. You know, it's really hard to figure out what's right and wrong, because it's kind of fluid, you know, it's situational, it's contextual, and the context varies heavily based on what we know versus what we do know, and what reveals itself across time, you know, what becomes knowledge. So overall, if I put this together and think of the line, "The night won't scare me away," this to me speaks to being open to being wrong, you know, and learning from mistakes. Because as much as you may want to do right, you may want to figure out what the right course of action is and do the right things, it's easy to become obsessed with that idea and, you know, just make mistakes because of that in of itself. So with that said, this song kind of speaks to me as an introspective passage where this person is trying to remind themselves not to be too much of a perfectionist and always aim to be right and absolutely right, because it's easy to fool yourself that way. It's easy to fool yourself or trick yourself into thinking that what you're doing is right, even though it's not right, you know, and when you're wrong, you may convince yourself that you're right nonetheless through stories you tell yourself. As far as the title goes, the night relates to the dark, and the dark to me represents the unknown here in this song. You won't have all the information you need to make correct decisions, to make right decisions, to do what is right. So in those instances, in order to not be afraid, you need to be open to relying on your intuition and feelings to guide you through the darkness, even though they may lead you to mistakes. Ultimately, you have to trust that those mistakes you will learn from and grow from. And yeah, that pretty much does it for what I have to say about this song. I really enjoyed it from a lyrical standpoint and from the musical standpoint as well. I liked how it sounded. Let me know what you guys thought, whether it's about my interpretation, whether it's about my reaction, whether it's about your thoughts on the song and what's to come from Plural One. Always love hearing what you guys have to say. You could let me know in the comments down below. Please leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it. I always appreciate the support. And yeah, that does it for this one, guys. Please stay strong, stay safe, and I will see you all next time. Have a great day, y'all.